So why is hierarchy important in spatial organization? So if I were to tell you this space right here has a very clear hierarchy to me, I guess what I want to look at is what does it mean for a space not to have hierarchy? What does that look like? So we have an example here which objects or these spaces are sort of placed in a very whimsical manner. There's not really a lot of organizational rules here about like where and to what orientation are these rooms sort of oriented. We do have a little bit of a hierarchy here with a sort of a dependent space on sort of this dominant space here, but overall the way that these outer spaces connect is not sort of any sort of hierarchy. And you know, if we were to look at an example with sort of a word game here, this is basically a list of a bunch of random words. And, you know, if you were a computer, it's very easy for a computer to search a list for a specific word, but for a human to do it, not so much. You know, if I were to ask you to look for the word wave, you would probably be able to find it as you sort of scan these lists, but you'll find it, but not with necessarily any sort of satisfaction. There's not really anything cerebral here as far as like finding this word. It's very rote sort of exercise. But there are many ways that we could possibly search this list to make that more of an exercise in thought. So it could be listed by the length of a word. And you look for wave being a 4-letter word, and you'd find it sort of among the other 4-letter words. Or we could search this alphabetically. That way you could find the particular word you're looking for. But what if we wanted this entire list to be imprinted on the player's mind? And that's very analogous to how we want the level, or all the sort of complex spaces and how they connect to each other imprinted on the player's mind. How could we find a particular word here and make it more cerebrally rewarding and sensible to find? I mean, I can imagine I sort of these words into maybe groups based on their meaning. So as an example here, you know, I just basically took these random words and kind of put them into basically associative, at least as far as I was concerned, groups. So up here we have sort of a list of people, and these are physics sort of words. Here's sort of like spycraft words, and as you can see, I'll just go ahead and create my own sort of namings for these groups. And if in this case I did ask you look for the word wave, you may scan here and see physics and guess that maybe wave belongs in sort of the physics category, and when you find it there, there's sort of a reward there for I guess feeling intelligent in sort of figuring out that sort of puzzle. But essentially this sort of breaks this very complex problem of a large number of seemingly random words into a smaller number of somewhat less random words. So if we looked at space as sort of a corollary here, this is basically a very ordered space, or an ordered bunch of spaces where we have this very sort of strong grid structure here, but there's a lacking of any sort of hierarchy, so there doesn't seem to be any sort of coherent pattern to how the spaces relate. So when I say that this is a hierarchy here, what I'm talking about is that we have sort of a large space here that's sort of the most dominant sort of spatial structure. All of the other sort of spaces are sort of dependent on that. And then when we look into some of these smaller spaces, like for instance this one over here, we have all of these little sort of rooms coming off of a dominant sort of hallway structure that sort of connects all of them, and it is the sort of the deciding factor in how these spaces are connected. And same thing with, we've got a hallway over here. So that's sort of what I'm talking about as far as like hierarchy of spatial dominance. So in the next way that is important for talking about sort of spatial organization with spatial composition is in organizational rules. So, and this is sort of when we look at sort of top down, how